All right, Freilich and Purim. Welcome to a special Purim edition of 30 Letters in 30 Days. What can you do? You know, within the 30 days of preparation for Yud Alef Nissan, it's kind of unavoidable. It's always going to be Purim, even if it's an Iber Yor, even in a leap year, because the Purim is always the second Adar. So that's the way it is. And so we'll try to infuse our learning tonight with a little extra spirit of Adala Yada, if that's possible. Okay. Tonight's letter, let's just jump right in. Baruch Hashem, Chof Hei Tishrei Tafshin Yud Tes, Brooklyn Shalom Uvracha. And I'm reading from the PDF that everyone can download at 30letters30days.com or at soulwords.org/letters. And if you're watching on YouTube, the link that I just mentioned, the links should be clickable there in the description below the video player. And you can download this PDF and print it just like I did, the exact same PDF I'm reading from. Okay, so as I read just a minute ago in Hebrew, by the grace of God, the 25th day of Tishrei, 5719, Brooklyn, New York, greetings and blessings. That I was writing to a man. And that's all we know. There's no name on the letter for whatever reason. Sometimes the names were kept private. We are moving along chronologically. If you remember, our first letter of this project was the first letter of volume 19 of Igris, and it was from Erev Rosh Hashanah. And we moved through the month of Tishrei. Now we're almost to the end of the month of Tishrei. We're at Chof Hei Tishrei. And here's the letter. Masher hineni Kabbalas Michtavei me Echod Chol Hamoed Sukkos. Ma Aleph Chol Hamoed Sukkos. I'm hereby confirming receipt of the letter that you wrote to me on the first day of the intermediate days of the Sukkot festival. Just a thought I was having when I read this. I know that people are often very careful about writing on Chol Hamoed unless it's something very important. I don't know the circumstances, but and I don't have a resolution for you. I'm just saying when I read Igros and I'm trying to put together the pieces and I'm trying to relate to the human context, things like that jump off the page, and I think to myself, why did this person write on Chol Hamoed? Not that it's impossible to do. It probably makes me think maybe it was some type of, they felt that it was an urgent issue. And lest you say, maybe it's not a religious person and they're not aware of that issue. It seems from the letter that this person is religious. In fact, the person is religious already, but not Chabad, and that is actually the focus of the letter. It's about making that transition to becoming an official Chabadnik. But you'll see as we read on. Okay. Umuvan shemasha kaisav. It is understood from that which you wrote. What did the person write? Shemis yare. That he's afraid. I shouldn't laugh. He's afraid. I don't know why it's funny to me, because the person wasn't joking. I'll finish the sentence and I'll tell you the cute thing I was thinking of. Shmis yare lekabel olav liyes chassid Chabadi. He's afraid to accept upon himself to be a Chabad chassid. Yeah, I'll read the rest of the sentence in a second. He says he's afraid to become a Chabad chassid. Again, it's not funny, but there's a story. Very few people know that the Lubavitcher Rebbe actually went to the home of the Satmar Rav, the Divrei Yoel, in 1954 It actually would have been 1953 because I believe it was Tafshin Yud Alef Nissan. It was the end of 53. It was in Cheshvan. How do I know? Because people who were there say that they discussed whether Halloween has the din of a chaga, of an Avodah Zarah holiday, as per the Mishnah, the first Mishnah in Avodah Zarah. Satmarov lost a daughter, Leilena. The Rebbe went to be Menachem Oval. And so the story is that Rebbe was heading into the house. Somebody was coming out. And this person's name was Reb Zev Gold. And he was a Rav from Yerushalayim. I believe he lived in Yerushalayim. And he was a close associate of Rav Zevin, of Shlomo Yosef Zevin, who was one of the great Talmidei Chachamim, great scholars of that era. He was, of course, the author of the Talmudic Encyclopedia, as well as the collection of Hasidic stories known as Sipurei Chassidim. And he used to write to the Rebbe quite often about many issues, including issues of very erudite scholarship. He sought the Rebbe's guidance to help him to clarify things that he was writing about. At any rate, so this Reb Zev Gold was also something of a scholar, and so he would look at the correspondences that Rav Zevin was receiving from the Rebbe, and he was very, very impressed by the Rebbe's answers. Again, they were discussing scholarly issues, so it was that type of a conversation. I know a lot of the igros that we read, the Rebbe is guiding people on personal issues. These were more of a scholarly nature, these correspondences. At any rate, so this Reb Zev Gold started to become very, very captivated by the Rebbe's style. Never having met the Rebbe in real life, just knowing the Rebbe from his letters, not even letters that the Rebbe wrote to this Rabbi Gold, but letters that the Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Zevin, and Rabbi Gold was sort of privy to. At any rate, so the Rebbe's walking into the Satmarov's house, and Rabbi Gold is walking out, and it's the first time Rabbi Gold is seeing the Rebbe in real life. I guess he'd seen pictures, so he recognized the Rebbe immediately, and he was sort of taken aback, and he said, Rebbe, hab ich meira is ich wer eira a chassid. I'm afraid I'm becoming your chassid. And the Rebbe smiled a big smile and said, was darf man das tun mit euch? Jeder kennt das doch tun mit euch, aber why do you have to do it out of fear? You could do the same thing out of love. Feel like you're afraid you're becoming my chassid? You don't have to become my chassid out of fear. You could become my chassid out of love. And anyway, this has nothing to do with this letter, but it just, that language rang a bell for me. The guy writes to the Rebbe and says, I'm afraid of becoming, not I'm afraid that I'm becoming, although maybe that's also the subtext, because I think the person was becoming a Chabad Chassid and he was trying to fight it. So, but at any rate, he wrote to the Rebbe. The Rebbe is quoting this person's letter and saying, you wrote to me and said that you're afraid of becoming a Chabad Chassid, specifically a Chabad Chassid. In fact, it's possible that this person was already some kind of other Chassid. I don't know. It seems that they were I'm pretty certain this person was religious on some level, but not Chabad. Perhaps there were even some other type of a chassid. But at any rate, the person says, I'm afraid of becoming a Chabad chassid. Why? Listen, this is so great. Mipnei shehi matelis oil koved shel limud chassidus v'chulu. Because it places upon him the heavy yoke of learning chassidus. See, I love that the guy knew that if you become a Chabad chassid, you have to learn Chasidus. Like, how can you be a Chabad Chassid and not learn Chasidus? It's like, you have to understand, Chabad is Chochmah Bina Das. It's intellect. So from the very beginning of Chabad, from the times of the Alter Rebbe, the whole approach of Chabad is moichen. It's about Havana Vasaga and learning things and internalizing it. And so that's sort of part and parcel, not sort of, it is part and parcel of the Chabad life. So this guy knows I can't just become a cultural Chabad chassid. I can't just, I'm not saying that this is what he was saying, but for 2020, is it 23? Oh my gosh. For 2023, it can't just be Borsellino and Smirnoff and Schmaltz herring. It's not a cultural thing. Chasidus Chabad means that you learn Chasidus, you learn Maimorim, and you learn Chasidus Inyanim. And he understood that, and he wasn't really excited about getting started doing that. So he told the Rebbe very honestly, I'm afraid to become a Chabad chassid because I know if I'm a Chabad chassid, I'm going to have to learn Chasidus, and I'm not up for that. He described it as an oil kaved, a heavy yoke. I'm not up for that burden. I can't take that burden. Okay. Very interesting. Now, I just want you to guess. Do you think that Rebbe is going to tell him, it's okay, become a Chabad chassid and don't learn Chasidus? If that sounds preposterous to you, that I'm even suggesting that, that's okay. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to other people. Okay. I want you to think about that, because for some of us, there is, I'll use the language that we use in learning, there is such a hava mina. Okay? Maybe there is such a concept. Is there such a concept as becoming Chabad and not learning Chabad Chasidus? So, as we'll see from the letter, that is not one of the suggestions that the Rebbe gives. That is not a loophole. That's not a way out. Doesn't even get mentioned. Okay, so what's the response? Kama tshuvais badavar. There are many answers to this matter. There's many answers, not just one answer. There's many answers. But here are the main ones. So that I was going to give a few answers, but these are only the main ones. There's a lot of other answers as well. Aleph, the first answer. I love this answer. Ein zeh hatelis oil chodesh. This is not, meaning becoming a Chabad chassid and having to learn Chabad Chasidus, is not placing upon him a new yoke. It's not a new burden. Because every single individual Jew, twice a day, accepts upon himself the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, as well as the yoke of mitzvahs, when they say Shema. Talks about in the Gemara and Brachos. The first you receive the oil Malchus Shemayim, then you receive the oil mitzvahs. But that's what the recitation of Shema is. That's what do you think you're agreeing to when you say Shema? You are agreeing to submit to the yoke of heaven, the heavenly kingdom, and the yoke of mitzvahs, divine authority, and the specific wishes of the divine authority. So the Rebbe says like this: you're afraid that becoming a chassid, a Chabad chassid, and having to learn this Chabad is like adding more pressure to you. The Rebbe says like this: I'm sorry to tell you, the pressure's already on. Like, just from the fact that you say Shema every day. That's why I'm assuming this person is already religious. So the Rebbe is saying, like, you already signed up. Like, you're not calling it being a Chabad chassid, but what you think that if you become a Chabad chassid, then you're going to have to learn Chasidus Chabad. The truth is, just from the fact that you say Shema twice a day, you have to learn Chasidus Chabad. I'll just continue here. Uchdvar Mishnah, Brachos Perek Beis, Mishnah Beis, like it says in the Mishnah, a clear ruling of the Mishnah in the Tractate of Brachos, chapter 2, Mishnah 2, which I mentioned earlier. There's the Shema is oil Malchus Shemayim and oil mitzvahs. V'harei limud zeh, and this study of Chasidus Chabad, cheleku ma'oil mitzvahs, is actually a part of the oil mitzvahs. It's part of the package that you already accepted upon yourself. Now, the Rebbe doesn't explain explicitly how that's so. I can deduce from other sources that perhaps it's part and parcel of the mitzvahs of Amunah and Ava and Yira and all the different mitzvahs that have to do with God consciousness. And how is someone supposed to perform those mitzvahs if he doesn't study Pnimiyas Torah? So at any rate, the Rebbe is saying you already signed up for this package, whether you call yourself Chabad or not. Since you accepted the general package, you should know that the general package includes within it the details as well. So it's like you're getting nervous because now you're seeing the itemized bill and you're like, whoa, I didn't order that. But you kind of did because that's what you're signing up for when you say Shema. Just to interject my own commentary here, but I love the fact that the first answer that Rebbe basically tells him that what he's afraid of is actually true. But he's silly to be afraid of it because it's not something that might happen. It's something that already happened. So you can stop being afraid of it happening. It's already happened. I love that in so many ways. But specifically, one of the things that makes me think of is the Hayom Yom, one of my favorite Hayom Yoms. I think every Hayom Yom is one of my favorites. But one of my favorite Hayom Yoms of Tes Zayin Menachem Av, where it talks about how the Baal Shem Tov used to travel around and he used to be involved in redeeming captives and strengthening the observance of Torah and teaching Chasidus. And what does it mean he was traveling around teaching Chasidus? Like, why not just put up a billboard and advertise Chasidus is taught here and let everybody let everyone flock to you? Why do you have to go out and go to them to teach them Chasidus? So the Mittler Rebbe explained, this is all part of this Hayom Yom Tes Zayin Menachem Av. So the Mittler Rebbe explained like this. He said, Galya Shabbat, that's the revealed, Nigle the Torah, the exoteric. I don't know if I ever saw the word exoteric used except in this context. It's one of those fun words that we use, one of those academic, acidic words that we use from time to time. At any rate, the legalistic, that type of stuff, Gemara mostly. So that aspect of Torah study, the Mittler Rebbe says, it's like water. And people are drawn to water. You know, think about the fact that like most cities are built by bodies of water. People want to be around water. You pay a premium to be right up next to the water. Teaching Nigla is something that attracts people. People want to learn a nice Geschmack Tosfos. You learn it and you toil and you get it, and it's very, very satisfying, like a cool drink of water. But Pnimiyas Torah is compared to fire. It's interesting. The water and fire are opposites, and two aspects of the Torah are compared to each of these. So the legal aspect of Torah is like water, cool drink of water, very satisfying, hits the spot. But then Pnimiyas Torah is compared to fire. And fire has the opposite effect on people. Fire scares people away. People run from fire. They don't run to fire, they run from fire. They run to water, they run from fire. So what are you supposed to do? People are running away from Chasidus. And which, this is the Mittler Rebbe's explanation of why the Baal Shem Tov, especially in the early days of Chasidus, before it was a known thing, he had to travel around and bring it to the people rather than just waiting for them to come to him. So what are you supposed to do about the fact that Chasidus is scary? In other words, let me just translate this. You learn Nigle and you make a siyum and you're very proud. I learned, I accomplished, and I have a chelik in Torah, and it's a good feeling. You learn Chasidus, and you find out that you're nothing. And, not nothing. It's not an insult, nothing. It means that you are, that your separate entity that you thought was your true self is actually a false construct, and really it has no ontological independence, and really you're one with the everything, with the totality of all, with a capital A. So it's not nothing, like it's not like an insult. You're one with Hashem, which is a beautiful thing. But still, it's a little bit different than the ego boost that you get from learning some Gemara and making a siyum and feeling very accomplished. You learn Chasidus, and it's like my separate selfhood sort of becomes dissolved into this much bigger picture. So it is threatening. It's, at least to the ego, it's threatening. It's ego death. So that's the fear. I mean, that's why it's fire. That's why people are running from it, because they're going to learn Chasidus and they're going to experience ego death. So the Mittler Rebbe says, so what are you supposed to do about that? It's, bad marketing. It's bad for marketing. So he says, Derfar darf der Mashpia gain zum Mekabel. So therefore, the person who teaches Chasidus has to go to the one who's going to learn Chasidus. Onzogen him, and he has to tell him like this: Hab kein meid in it. Don't be afraid. Val Hashem elikecha eish echlahu. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire. Does that not blow you away? You understand what just happened? The guy's afraid of Chasidus because he detects that it's fire. In other words, what does fire mean? Fire means it's going to consume me. See, water, I take it into me, and it fills my cells, and it becomes part of me. Like, I learned some nigla, and now I know some nigla, and I'm a Talmud Chacham. Fire doesn't go into me, I go into it. If you touch fire, it doesn't become you, you become it. You become fuel for the fire, which in this case means that you become one with the all, as I was saying. But it's still very threatening, at least to the animal soul. So the Mittler Rebbe says, when the guy picks up on it, and he's like, hold on a second, if I'm going to continue learning Chasidus, it's going to nullify my former sense of self. So what are you supposed to tell him? No, don't worry. It's not going to happen. You're going to learn Chasidus, and you're going to remain a yesh. It's okay. It'll leave your ego intact. No, you tell him the truth. You tell him, don't be afraid, because the Lord your God is a consuming fire. Consuming fire, that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid it was a fire. You just admitted it was a fire. Now you're scaring me worse. No, but here's what it's saying. At the end of the day, buddy, you can't really wriggle out of this, because Hashem, your God, is a consuming fire. Like, you're afraid because you think Chasidus is fire? The Eibishter is fire. Like, you think uniquely it's just Chasidus that's fire? Hashem himself is fire. In other words, Hashem himself isn't there to enhance you, to make you more of a separate entity, God forbid. No, you were created as a separate entity so that you could be mavatal that, nullify yourself through willful surrender and become more godly. You should become more him, not he should become more you. You should become more him. That's what fire is. So the Lord your God is fire. So you're afraid of the fire? I got news for you. You think it's unique to Chasidus? It's not. Maybe it's more obvious within Chasidus, but that's the very nature of having a relationship with Hashem. A relationship with Hashem means that you will become consumed and converted into the light and the flame itself. That's why that's one of my favorite Hayom Yoms. At any rate, so it seems like in this letter, the Rebbe is saying a similar thing, which is that the guy says he's afraid to become a Chabad Chassid because of the burden, he calls it a yoke, that it'll place upon him. So the Rebbe says, yeah, don't be afraid of that. It already happened. You're a Yid. You already have this obligation. You already have this yoke. So whether or not you formally signed up for it or not, you have to know that it's actually part of the package deal that you're already part of. So you can stop worrying about it. It already happened. Okay. I just love that answer. I love that answer. Okay. That was Aleph. Beis. Oil ha'omer The above mentioned or aforementioned yoke, ain't a covet. It's not so heavy. He ain't heavy, he's my brother. It's not so heavy. Because learning Chasidus, like learning any aspect of Torah, you go progressively from light to heavy. That's a very practical answer. It's like, why are you intimidating yourself opening up Ayin Base and being like, I can't make heads or tails of this thing? Hold on a second. Let's start slowly. You start with a little Sefer Maimorim Yiddish, if you can't read Yiddish, so you can read the translation. But Sefer Maimorim Yiddish, by the way, was Maimorim that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote for a magazine called Hakriya V'Kedusha, which was meant for the masses. The Rebbe once called, Michal Zeligson told me that, I'm not, he's my source, I'm not sure where where this was said, but he told me that the Rebbe called Sefer Maimorim Yiddish of the Frierdiker Rebbe a Kitzer Shulchan Aruch of Chasidus. At any rate, so yeah, you don't have to start with intense, heavy stuff. You'll start with easier stuff. And you'll work your way up. Okay, so practical answer. All right, Gimel. In the course of this progression, as you are going from light to heavy, as you're getting better and better at learning Chasidus, when you become more familiar with the subject matter, you get used to the terms and the style of thinking. The Rebbe says specifically, two things: the depth and the clarity. The depth and the clarity. So when you get more familiar with Chasidus, you're going to start to appreciate two aspects: the depth of Chasidus, the Amkus Shaba, and the Bahirus, the clarity of Chasidus. It's deep and it's clear. And when that happens, Misraba Acheshik Lalamda, it's going to increase your desire to learn it. The Hatainig Basagas and Yonim, and the pleasure that you're going to have when you understand these matters. Shishnei Elu, that these two things, basically, the depth and the clarity, when you'll start to appreciate it and you're going to enjoy it, that's the operative word. You're going to have tainug in it. Mahapchin inyan oil, it's going to transform something that you used to think of as a yoke, le'inyan shel rotzin v'cheshek, into something that's very favorable and desired. So the Rebbe says, yeah, it might start off. First of all, you're going to start off easy. Start with training wheels. But second of all, as you get better and better at it, it's not going to become a yoke anymore. It's going to feel great. You're going to love it. You're going to enjoy it. So if you're concerned about it being a burden, trust me, you just got to stick it out past the, the learning curve, and it's going to be very enjoyable. And you're going to want to learn it. You're going to enjoy learning it. Okay. V'yadua hasiper. Now the Rebbe says, and it's a known story. It's a known story. What's a known story? Al Dvar Rabbeinu Azokin Balatanya, story about the Alter Rebbe. What is this known story about the Alter Rebbe? Shebetchilas Pirsume Esterase, when he was first publicizing his style of teaching, meaning Chabad to the masses, Teres Chabad, B'Medinas Reis and Velita, in White Russia and in Lithuania. That was the geographical area where the Alter Rebbe had his influence, as opposed to the other Talmidei Amagid who were more centered in Poland and other areas. So when the Alter Rebbe was first teaching his Chabad approach in that area, and you should understand that that area specifically was a bastion of Hisnagdus, so much so that the term Lithuanian came to mean not just the geography of where these people lived, but a certain approach. Even to this day, the term Litvak carries with it certain cultural connotations. So that's specifically where the Alter Rebbe went. Because the Alter Rebbe was Shnei Or, he was Nigla and Chasidus, Tanya and Shulchan Aruch, and he could speak the language of these people who were very into Nigla, and all the Talmidei Amagid were great Talmidei Chachamim. You should know that, every single one of them. But the Alter Rebbe especially was able to speak like a Rosh Hashiva in the language that appealed to that culture. So at any rate, when the Alter Rebbe was first revealing these teachings, over derech Shklov, he passed through a town called Shklov. Mivtzar, the Rebbe calls it Mivtzar, a stronghold, Hamanagdim of the opponents, Oz at that time, L'Toirazu Vinyoneha, the opponents to this style of teaching Torah and all the things that go with it, the whole Hasidic worldview and lifestyle. So he went to Shklov, which was a stronghold of opposition. It was not friendly territory, to say the least. It was hostile territory. Va'ala ala bima, he went up to the bima in shul, bebeis hakneses hagadol, in the big shul, sham there. Ubakel nigen kedarke bakedesh, and in the voice of a song, which was his tendency, the Alter Rebbe had a certain lilt, a certain musical melody that he would use often when he would speak. And he said, Hikri HaKosef, he said the following verse, a pasuk from Tehillim, Taimuru kitev Hashem, taste and see that Hashem is good, and it says here in Yiddish, Farzucht und zet, taste and see, wie Hashem Yisbarach is good, how Hashem is good. Ubiyes dvar of yetzin men alev, since his words came from the heart, chaytzef laves eish, it sparked flames of fire. Nichnasu lelev hashemim, it entered the hearts of the listeners. Kimasuper mechosid lechosid dar achar dar ad lederenu zeh, as this story was handed down generation after generation until our generation, meaning this story was handed down by people who were there and saw it, and they told others who told others until we have this story. And what happened after he said this? He stood up at the bima and he said, Taimuru kitev Hashem, taste and see that Hashem is good. Seinen noch gelaufen, zendliche junge Leid. So tens of young men ran after him, sha'osku achrei kein b'limud Teres Chasidus, and afterwards they became involved in learning Teres Chasidus, ubehemshech hazman, and with the passage of time, naisu la'amudei adas hachsidim, these guys who, from Shklov, of all places, who chased, not chasing, but they ran after the Alter Rebbe. They were running after him to join him, to follow him. These guys from Shklov who ran after the Alter Rebbe to become his disciples, they became the pillars of the Hasidic community, these guys. All because the Alter Rebbe said, taste and you will see. Just taste. That's what the Rebbe is telling him. Just taste. Now, the Rebbe says this is a known story. Where's the story known? So I just want to mention that we don't plan these things. We chose to do Chelik Yud Tes of Chelik Yud Ches of Igrus this year, and we're going in chronological order. And this letter, like I said, is from Chafhei Tishrei, has nothing to do overtly with Purim. But I want to tell you something. This is probably the most appropriate letter that we could have ever read on Purim. Many people are aware of what was considered to be a most unique event in the Purim Farbrengens over the years. Purim Tafshin Chai, Tafshin Yud Ches, 1958. That Farbrengen started at 8:30. And it went till 5:30. It started at 8:30 p.m. and it went till 5:30 a.m. It was a 9-hour Farbrengen. The Rebbe said a mimer, which was an hour long. And it was generally known to be a Farbrengen full of what we call Giloyim, just revelations of a whole different order, even than that what was ordinarily revealed at the Rebbe's Farbrengens. Now, at this Farbrengen, I think there were 10 sichas. In the 9th sicha, and maybe somebody can do the math and figure out what time it would have been, 3 or 4 in the morning by that time, the Rebbe told a story. Purim Tavshin Chai. What story did the Rebbe tell? This story. The story of the Alter Rebbe walking into the shul in Shklov and standing at the bima and saying, Time Oru, and the Yungalite running after him to become his disciples, wanting an opportunity to taste and to see the goodness. So it's interesting because this letter is written Tishrei Tafshin Yud Tes. It would have been just over 7 months. 7 months and 10 days, 11 days after this Farbrengen. So when the Rebbe is saying, Ki Yadua Hasipur, it's known, the story, it was a fresh story. The Rebbe had just told the story at the previous Purim's Farbrengen, the Farbrengen, famous Purim Farbrengen of Purim Tavshin Chai. Now, there's nothing like hearing the actual holy voice of the Rebbe. Nothing can convey it. No description can convey it. So I just want to share with you. Hopefully the technical part of this is going to go smoothly. And for this, I'm going to put on my headphones to make sure that I'm getting the right sound pad over here. Now you see. You're going to finally see what this roadcaster behind me is. Okay. This is Purim Tavshin Chai, the 9th Sikha. Just a quick half-a-minute clip of the Rebbe telling this excerpt of this story. The Alter Rebbe went to the Mivtzer, the stronghold of opposition in Shklov. He went to the Bima, and he said, Time Uru, and the younger light ran after him to embrace Chasidus. Okay.
Wie der Rebbe, der Nossi von unser Dorf erzählt hat, der alte Rebbe gekommen in der Nord, was dort sie gewähnt, der Mifzer von dem Menagdim Linie nach Chasidus. Und ist gegangen auf der Bime und hat gesagt, wer gesagt, bin ich und Tamuru, Kitzev Hawaii, versucht wird ihr sehen, na der Rebbe stelle ist gut. Und ist ein Rebbe gegangen von der Bime und seinen eben noch gelaufen nach Sirius. Mir Avreichim, Talmide Chachomim, was einen geworden Chassidim, und sie haben dann noch Mephis gewähnt, Majonis, Teres HaChassidus.
Okay, I have no words. I have no words of commentary for that. Very special. Okay, and again, that's the Rebbe's holy voice on this night, the night of Purim. So there could be no more appropriate letter, I think, for tonight than this letter. And we know that when we are learning this letter, the Rebbe is speaking to us, and the Rebbe is telling us this story, Taimuru Kiteva Vaya, on this night of Purim. Okay, so the Rebbe continues. Dealing with this person's apprehensions about learning Chasidus. Hachshash hanesef shalai, his other worry. Shal yedei limud Chasidus la yuchol lisrakis kol kach b'chikerosav. He's not going to be able to focus. If he's going to learn Chasidus, he's not going to be able to focus on his research. I don't know if this person was some type of an academic. Sounds like maybe he was, but he was involved in things that required focus. Some type of intellectual work. So he's saying, I can't learn Chasidus because, my head is very into my research, and I can't focus. I won't be able to focus on my research if I start learning Chasidus. So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe doesn't really take that complaint very seriously. The Rebbe says, "Hine beyode lahakdish lelimod zeh, but tekufa reshena zem yaspik." You can just set aside time, and if certainly in the early stages, remember that Rebbe said you're going to learn it incrementally. It's going to be a progression as far as you're getting more and more used to learning Chasidus and enjoying more and more Chasidus. So at the beginning, this is going to be enough. At the beginning, this is all you have to do is just to set aside time. Al koponus mane haponim mechakiros elu, time that you're not doing your research. Like, certainly don't tell me you don't have any time where you're not doing your research. Okay, so don't take away from your research. Don't take away from your research. The times when you're not doing your research, so then that's enough that you can learn Chasidus during that time. Okay. I think that Rebbe is hinting when he says in the first stages it's going to be enough, that eventually the person will come to a point where he will probably start stealing from his research time and using it to pay his Chasidus time. You know the famous story that the guy asks his rabbi, he says, I have 5 minutes a day to learn. What should I learn, Chasidus or Nigla? And his rabbi says, Chasidus, 5 minutes a day. If you have 5 minutes, you should learn Chasidus. The guy says, why? And the rabbi says, because if you learn Chasidus 5 minutes a day, eventually you'll realize that you have far more than 5 minutes a day in which to learn Torah. Okay. So the Rebbe says, now, regarding the fact that I'm repeating myself, I don't know if the Rebbe means in this letter itself, or maybe there were previous correspondences. Al dvar limud zeh nitzichusai, and its importance regarding this limud, learning Chasidus, and its an importance. Like the Rebbe is saying, why do I keep repeating this to you? Because because I'm not sure if you should read this, because we're all commanded to learn Chasidus, because the Rebbe said that earlier, that it's part of the oil mitzvahs, or maybe the Rebbe is saying because we're all commanded to, and the Rebbe doesn't say the word rebuke, but that's the implication here. We're commanded to correct someone else's behavior. Kevin Sha'amr Chazal, like our sages say, in such a situation, admei apamim. What does it mean, admei apamim? Even 100 times. It's talking about rebuke. The sages say that you have to try to correct somebody's behavior, even if you have to come back 100 times. And by the way, one of the meanings of the 100 times is that you don't come out with both guns blazing. You go gently, and even if you have to do it so gently that it takes 100 times, but you have to be committed to it in the long term. You're not going to win any hearts by coming on too strong. But at any rate, so the Rebbe is saying, I know I'm repeating myself a lot about this idea about I really want you to learn Chasidus, but it's important, and if I have to remind you 100 times. So our sages have already told me that may be what I have to do, and I'm ready to do that if that's what's required. Okay. So, God willing, in accordance with the content of this year's Michtov Klali, that I would send out general letters, Michtovim Klolim, to all the Jewish people during special points of the year, especially in conjunction with a Yom Tov. Rosh Hashanah being one of those times. So the Rebbe is saying, so in accordance with the Teichen, in the teaching that was in the Michtav Klali of Rosh Hashanah this year, which would have only been a few weeks prior to this letter, Yiras Minias as Haminias, you're going to see these obstacles, the obstacles you're talking about, La Amor, regarding the above-mentioned topic about learning Chasidus, Kamei Shehein, you're going to see it as it is. Right? You're going to see them, the obstacles, as they are. Like, you talk to me about these obstacles, I think if you'll look at the Michtav Klali of Rosh Hashanah, it'll put things in perspective for you, and you're going to start to realize that these obstacles that you're talking about, you're afraid of becoming Chabad Chassid because you have to learn Chasidus, it's an extra burden, it's too difficult, you don't have time because you have to research. All that stuff, you're going to see those obstacles as they are, Zeisameres, and that means, the Rebbe spells it out, Kitanes beyeser, very small. Very small. These complaints you have, they're trivial matters. They're not totally non-existent, but they're very, very small matters. And you're going to see the truth. And because these things are so small, you're going to see that if you make a strong commitment, you're going to be able to completely get rid of these obstacles. One good, strong commitment is going to be all it takes, and all of these issues that you're having about learning Chasidus are going to disappear. with honor, esteem, and blessing, awaiting good news in all of the above mentioned. And that is our Purim letter. Freilichen Purim again, and we will see you tomorrow night for another letter.